Thank you very much, everybody. Well, respected professionals, keynote speaker, Mr. Terry Naimbi, and then our esteemed session leader, Mr. Emmanuel Hamadwe, and presenters, Ms. Victoria Firi Chutungo, Ms. Maggie Katungo, Ms. Buma Dasandev, Mr. Roshan Mishra, and Mr. Mustafa Ibadifat. Greetings to you all. Today is Tuesday, April 5th, 2022, and you are currently attending the International Virtual Conferences on Museum, IVCOM. This is Group 7 African session, and this is the first conference regarding the Group 7 session. So on behalf of ICOM Zambia and ICOM Family Forum, it's a great honor to welcome you all. My name is Mina Lama, and I'm a member of ICOM Nepal and moderator for this session. So before we begin, I would like to request all the attendees to mute their microphones. And I have a few requests, like besides this. Well, today's session is also being recorded, and the link will be made accessible to our messenger group of ICOM Family Forum. And if you have any questions, please use the chat box to drop your questions. Due to our time limitation, we won't be taking questions in person. Besides that, all our presenters, you will be receiving 20 minutes of the time for the presentation. Well, with this brief request, let me commence today's session with the introduction of our honorable keynote speaker, Mr. Terry Naimbi. So he is the Vice President of ICOM International Paris and the curator at the Livingstone Museum. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Terry Naimbi for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minna, for the introduction. And I would like to, first of all, thank the group and the team of Muhammad Akhtar Jabed for all the organization of these virtual conferences that are keeping us as museum professionals together and continue communicating amidst these difficult times of COVID-19. And now we seem to be opening up the world. It makes it a little bit better for everyone that now we hope to meet. And as ICOM family, we hope to meet in Prague next August. And I hope to see all your faces, Mohammed and all the others there. We hope we can now meet and continue our dialogue as museum professionals. So for today's particular session, as you can see already from your screen, I would like to talk about what decolonization means for African museums. And although it is limited to African museums, I know that we have similar situations, similar connections, similar challenges as museums around the world when it comes to aspects of decolonization. Next, please. So that's just a table of contents of the things I will be looking at in my very short presentation, and I tabulate where first the museums came from and what it meant for us as Africans, and then to build on this particular aspect to go to aspects of illicit trafficking that has happened and the challenges and the aspects of decolonization for African museum. Next, please. So here you have as an introduction to try and understand where museums came from. And for many African states, these institutions we call museums were introduced by early settlers and European settlers that came to the continent. And the early curators at that time had their own way of wanting to portray the narratives of the people and the people's cultures that they represented in the institutions or in the museums, so to say. And cultural property was collected and displayed mostly void of stating what these cultural items meant to the people and their spiritual roles that they played in the society. So they were divorced from what they were doing and what their significance was in the cultural settings of the African people in those times. So in the late 19th and 20th century, a lot of cultural property was collected, and it was during the time for scramble for Africa, following, of course, the Berlin's conference late in 19th century. And of course, some of this cultural heritage was kept in the institutions that are museums today, and most of it was externalized to the global north. Next, please. And so, talking about our early museums on the continent, they were established mostly by colonial authorities that wanted to understand about the African cultural heritage, the ethnic groups of the people who lived in the areas that they were going to colonize. And so they set up these museums so that they could show to mostly their fellow colleagues and friends that came to visit from the global north what kind of people were living in those areas. And so these museums in the early times served the interest of the human settlers and not the local people. And most of the times, the collections were mostly ethnographic, but we saw in a number of years other disciplines being added on, such as archaeology and many other disciplines like natural history that started coming into being and being represented in these institutions. So the early museums, you will find today still influence a few museums in the way they do things, the way they do their exhibitions and carry out their programs. And in some way, they still continue to perpetuate the perception that museums are Eurocentric phenomena as seen by many Africans in many different countries in Africa. And so you find not so many people, local people, visit our institutions because they think these are institutions that are meant to be visited by Europeans and not by them as local people. Next, please. So when we talk about illicit trafficking, African states have suffered from illicit trafficking of cultural property since the late 18th century, when there is some feedback. Yes. No, previous slide, please.
Sure.
So African states have suffered from illicit trafficking. Have suffered from illicit trafficking of cultural property since the 19th century. There are a lot of objects that were appropriated during times of war, and these objects found their way into the global north.
Sorry.
And these.
Excuse me, sorry. Ms. Gayatri, could you please turn off your microphone? Ms. Gayatri?
Okay, we are good. Previous slide, please, Mina.
Sure, sorry.
So sorry.
No, that's fine, Gayatri. And so there are a lot of objects I was just stating that were appropriated from times of war and during the colonial times, and these objects found their way mostly in the global north. And it was not only objects that left, and like you will hear from me later on, even human remains were taken out of the continent, going up into the global north, and cultural property from many African states found themselves in museums, and they're still there, most of it. And according to some research, some people say almost 80 to 90% of cultural property from the African states finds itself in many museums out of Africa. Unfortunately, the situation that we have now is the true picture of how much of Africa's heritage has gone in the global north is not known by many African states, and many of these institutions that have kept this heritage out in the global north have not done full disclosure of what they have that belongs to the African people and to African states. Next, please. Next slide, please, Mina. So decolonization of African museums. For museum professionals on the continent working on decolonization have been doing it for so many years, for decades. Of course, it has differed in some states that many have gone and advanced way ahead than their colleagues, and others still seem to be playing catch up on aspect of decolonization. And so what does decolonization mean? It means several things to many different people in different states, in different museums, and to people of different fields within our museum field. And here I don't try to describe decolonization in one particular dimension, but just state a few aspects of what decolonization aspects mean to different people. To many people, it entails a complete change of the way they do things, or changing of narratives, especially regarding communities represented in our museums, involves inclusivity of people's cultures. Exclusivity, there are many cultures that are represented in the museums, but yet others are either underrepresented or unrepresented at all. And so when we talk about decolonizing our institutions, we want to talk about being inclusive of cultures that are underrepresented in our society or have been totally excluded before. And so this is all part of aspects of decolonization that we want to talk about. Next slide, please. It calls for curators, certainly, also to challenge the frontiers of their comfort zones. And curators cannot at all stay and live and work as it has always been. It must be a thing that must be challenging their minds all the time. How can we be more inclusive? How can we serve our society much better as institutions that have moved from institutions that just served the interests of initial settlers to institutions that are important for social change in society. So curators must continue challenging themselves and challenging these frontiers of their comfort zones. It also entails rethinking how we handle human remains that are in our custody, that are in our institutions, thinking of making ethical considerations of how we're going to display them, how we're going to keep them, and the interpretations that we get out of these special collections that we keep in our institutions, to start thinking when we go out in the fields, do we really need to collect human remains and come and keep them in boxes within our institutions? What is the best way to do? Do we keep them in situ in a buried state or bring them to our institution? And if we bring them to our institutions, what do we really want to do with these human remains that we have? These are aspects of decolonization that curators have to think about when they are in their institutions and they want to think of how to move forward with the way they do it. It involves rethinking of the roles of the collections that we have in our custody. Is it ethically or morally right for us to have them? And some of these are collections that have been inherited from those that handled or managed museums or established museums. So these are aspects that we have to think about when we are thinking of decolonization of our institutions. Museum and heritage museum professionals on the continent are asking for cultural property in the global north to be restituted or repatriated back. And this is also another dimension of decolonization that is a new wave that is happening right now, and the curators of museums and museums together with governments on the continent are now talking about these issues, wanting back their heritage to the continent. Next slide, please. But there have been challenges. It hasn't been all been smooth going when we talk about aspects of restitution and repatriation. You will find most acquisitions that were done, as I have already said, done mostly in the late 19th century and just around the beginning of the 20th century. And this was before the conventions or the UN conventions were in place. And so the challenge is also with many African states when it comes to wanting to ask for items to be restituted back to the continent. They cannot use these UNESCO instruments because these instruments are said to be non-retroactive. It means that they cannot be used for cases that were done before the conventions were made. And here you can think of conventions like the you can talk about the 1954 protocol, Hague Protocol, and the 1970 conventions that cannot be used to get back collections that were collected late 19th century. And so this act as a challenge. And so most African states find it, these conventions not as helpful as they could be. Also, there is a challenge that most African states do not know what is theirs, but that is domiciled in the global north. And there is also an extra challenge of lack of proper documentation of their own collections. And this isn't particularly referring to aspects of illicit trafficking that may happen. They fail to claim the items because they do not have proper documentations of these collections. Of course, there is an extra challenge. There is, I don't know who.
Yeah, even I can't find out who is speaking.
Okay. So, okay, that must be Precious Mugia from Zambia. I'm sure she's muted. Negotiations for restitution and repatriation usually take a very long time in many instances. And this has also tended to be a big challenge, especially for African states when they start asking for their cultural property to be restituted back to their states. Next slide, please. I will now continue to give a few examples of challenges that have happened and examples, just 3 examples. And here you have a depiction of one particular lady called Sarah Batman, was a Khoi lady who was exhibited in the UK and also in France. in public spaces as a freak, and because of the way she was biologically built. And she was sold even from the UK to France and exhibited in public by a person who owned animals like a zoo, and then she was exhibited in public places. And this lady, Sarah Batman, died in 1815 in France. And when she died, she was not buried, neither was she repatriated back to South Africa. But then her brain was removed and the skeleton and sexual organs were put on display in a museum in France, and they continued to stay in exhibition until 1974. And even up to 1974, she was not repatriated, and the South African government kept these discussions. Her remains were only repatriated back to South Africa for her to get a proper burial only in 2002. So you see that these aspects of restitutions and repatriation do take quite some time. Next slide, please. Here, there is a picture showing some of the tribes of Namibia, the Herero and Nama, that were colonized then just in the late 19th and early 20th century by the German forces. And sometime of November of 1904, the Herero and Nama people decided to revolt against this occupation, or rather being colonized by the German forces. And then they were displaced, and most of them were killed, and then they were left to go into the Kalahari Desert to stay there. And most of them were also killed even in the Kalahari Desert, and mass graves were dug, and some of them were being found as recent as 1999. And for a long time, the German government did not accept this as a genocide, but eventually did accept it as a genocide. And in recent times, as recent a few months ago, the German government decided to offer reparations for these genocide atrocities that were done in Namibia to the tune of 1.1 billion euros that will be given to the Namibian government, but to spread as terms of aid, technical aid, to be given for social amenities such as health facilities, skills training for the people of Herero and Nama tribes, and things like exchange programs introduced between people of these tribes that were aggrieved and who were traumatized by these genocides that were done. Financial reparations were still being resisted, and are still being resisted for fear of setting a precedence for other future genocide claims that could be claimed against them or any other states from the global north that may have been involved in some form of genocides or any other aspects that were done either on the African continent or in different countries. Next slide, please. So some challenges also experienced at the Benin Bronzes that were taken by the British Army in 1897 from the Benin city in part of Nigeria. And these were important cultural objects for the Oba people of Nigeria. And many of them were taken and have been spread all over the global north. You find them not only in the UK now, but you find some of them in places like France, others were taken to New Zealand, and further places like Germany, the United States, and so on. And these collections have been there and have not returned as quickly as they needed to return. The French government has recently returned two important pieces back to the people of Nigeria and also to Benin, and also the UK government has also recently returned some pieces, but not everything has returned. There is still many objects that is still out in the European museums. Next slide, please. And so then what does it mean for future of African museums in terms of decolonization? There is need to continue the dialogue between African museum and heritage museums. And this should be enhanced. And I'm aware that under the African Union, there has been an effort to make a statement, a joint statement of African states regarding the issue of restitution and repatriation of cultural heritage property that is outside the African states. There is need for knowledge sharing between African museum professionals in the area of decolonization, and also there is need to strengthen legal instruments for the protection of cultural property in the national laws of African states. And also there is an aspect, and there's a proposal to create decolonization committees within our African states, within continue to discuss and look at issues of decolonization in our museums. And there is need to continue encouraging the global North-South provenance research on collections that are held by colleagues in the global North. Much to this, we also would like to see full disclosure of our collections that are kept in the global North. And I think this is about my last slide. Mina, please, next. I would like to thank you all for listening, and thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry, for your presentation. All right, so next we have Sir Emmanuel. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Yes, so our honorable guest and session leader, Mr. Emmanuel Hamatwe. So he is the current president of ICOM Zambia and also the head of educational services for the Choma Museum in Zambia. Now, without further delay, let me invite Mr. Emmanuel for the presentation. So let me share the screen for you.
Thank you very much.
So, Sir Emmanuel, whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think I've been adequately introduced. I hope I'm loud and clear.
Yes.
Okay. In my presentation, I'm going to talk about my museum, which is the Choma Museum and Crafts Center. Also, I'll talk about my job as head of education services at Choma Museum. And specifically, I will talk about a program called Nilumbe, that is a youth program. Bearing in mind that the title of my presentation is the value of museum education services. In this presentation, I hope I will be able to state the value of activities in education with one point in mind, that museum activities have to be hands-on, hearts-on, and minds-on. Museums must be perceived to be places of discovery, fun, and education. And I think I talked a lot about this in my previous presentation, which was very informal. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, the Choma Museum has about 20 members of staff. To be full-time operational, we need 48, so there's a deficit. And we specialize as a museum in art, ethnography, history, and crafts development. So those are the 4 thematic areas that the museum focuses on. The museum is supported by a government grant, which comes every month. And also we do a lot of craft sales and hire out of utilities, and we rent some of the museum estates and properties. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so that is our staff establishment. Like I said, we have 23 over a requirement of 48. Next slide, please. Next slide. What do we have in our collections? In our collections as a museum, we have objects and specimens of the material culture of the Vatonga people. And also we try to tell the story of the Vatonga across the waters. These are the consequences and implications of what happened during, before, during, and after the construction of the Kariba Dam. We have one of Zambia's largest statues in our museum that is dedicated to the remembrance of the father of Zambian politics, Harry Mwanga Nkumbula. We also have a lot of collections which are findings from our research and research products. Some of the museum collection include bequeathed articles from individuals which have been donated to us, and also from our museum programs, we collect a number of products that are in our custody. Some of the exhibits are also loans from other museums in South Africa and within Zambia, particularly Livingstone Museum, the oldest and biggest museum in Zambia. And of course, we have artworks from previous exhibitions. Next slide, please. Next slide. As Assistant Education Officer, my duties are listed there in the slide. The first one is to plan and to collaborate and promote museum education service, initiate regular orientation programs for museum staff. Basically, this is training. Museum staff need to be trained from time to time to be reoriented, and new members of staff also have to be initiated into the museum family. So that is one of my responsibilities. And of course, is one of my principal roles is to provide guided tours in order to increase public awareness on heritage for the education and enjoyment of communities. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Yes, sir.
You can see there in those images on the top left, that is me there planning. On the top right, that was the mounting of the Harry Mwanga Nkumbula Stadium. At the bottom there, we are reviewing a museum exhibition, a temporal exhibition on the Great Apes, and this is to make it more user-friendly to our visitors. And there on the bottom right, that is a booth which we had opened to advertise and do outreach on museum services during the International Library Week. Next slide, please. Next slide.
Yes. Can you see the slide?
At the Choma Museum, I am part and parcel of the general and staff management meetings. We plan weekly. Hello? I'm responsible to run the Facebook page. We also do a lot of radio broadcasts, almost 2 to 3 radio programs dedicated to the museum every month. We attend what we call the district development coordination meetings, and those at the province. The Choma Museum lies in the provincial headquarters. So there's a lot of activities in the government district and also at the province level. From time to time, I'm delegated to handle museum correspondence, and I handle public programs and special errands and assignments on behalf of the director. As part of my job, from time to time, team building exercises so that the museum staff are able to do a lot of teamwork. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. As you can see in this slide, is a list of some of my professional roles and responsibilities. Remember, we're talking about the virtual of SAS and in collaboration with the Department in the Ministry of Tourism, which helps us.
Sir Emmanuel? Sir Emmanuel, are you there?
Hello, am I there?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Please.
I was trying to talk. I'm back?
Yes.
Okay. So in order to make these museum activities effective and interesting to the public and museum visitors, we do a lot of reviews, we do a lot of media liaison with the public, and we also do a lot of planning, particularly the storylines. Most often, it is not about the images that are displayed in the galleries, but it is the story behind the images that elicits excitement and fun and education opportunities on the part of the public. As head of museum services, I try as much as possible to write inspirational notes, both in written and also for radio transcript, and also video telecast. And I am also tasked to do museum representation at community and civic meetings. So through these interactions, I am able to talk about the museum more effectively and give a lot of information because the museum is not just a building which is designated in a particular geographical area. The museum must go to where the people are. If you can't bring the people to the museum, we would like to take the museum to where the people are. So we have a number of art clubs and museum clubs where we go out and interact with members of the public on visitations. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Yes.
As you can see there in the top right, that is a local chief. The chief responsible was giving a presentation on behalf of his chiefdom, and that is me standing there and his retainer. On the top right, that is the provincial education officer listening to my outreach message on International Library Week. And of course, at the bottom, you can see we had, I think that was a picture from one of the museum's days before COVID. And on the bottom right, that was me doing a live radio broadcast to the public where we were officiating and documenting a music festival. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Emmanuel, can you see the screen?
Yes, we continue there. As you can see, we have a number of public programs. I can see the screen. Let me concentrate on the bottom two pictures. The one on the left is one of Zambia's prominent politicians who passed on 3 years ago. He served under the president's 6 presidents of Zambia. So he was one of the longest serving politicians in Zambia, and we were doing a research with him, Mr. Honorable Daniel Munkombwe. At the bottom right there is a high-powered delegation, which I was taking around the museum in an education exposure program so that they could understand what we do, so that when they talk to their subjects, to their communities, to their heads of government departments, it could actually bring benefits to museums. So when you are in the education department, it is important to target key profile members of the community, members of the public, like senior government officers, traditional leaders, opinion makers, to understand the role of museums and the community. So here in this slide, we are talking about a public program which we call the Wise One, or a Tonga vernacular word called Siabusongo, where we interact with senior citizens, members of the public who are opinion makers, so that they can understand what we do. In this program, the Siabusongo program, we talk to senior citizens who have lived. They can share the heritage of our country, the heritage of our tribe, the heritage of traditional systems with our museum, so that we can be able to become a solid hub that is giving correct information, verified information to members of the public. Next slide, please. This is one of my interesting programs. The word on top there, Milumbe, means message. It is a message which is carried on by a special emissary. That picture there depicts a young group of unemployed youth who are doing a traditional presentation on early marriages, the fight against early marriages, arranged marriages, gender-based violence. They are talking about succession laws, property grabbing, human rights. So they do this through music, through poetry, through essays, through drama, through debate, and also through art. Milumbe is a program particularly designed for young people. In Africa, or maybe let me say in Zambia, in a traditional Zambian setup, children are not meant to be heard. Children cannot speak where their adults are. Children do not have a voice. So the museum gives the children this voice so that they can express their joy. The youth can express their suffering. The youth can express their anger. The youth can express their protest. The youth can talk against poor government decisions. They can talk about poor parenting and lack of good role models. So this is a program, Milumbe, which gives to say it through a song, to say it through a poem, to say it through a sketch, so that people, through entertainment, they can get some form of education and the public is well informed. So this is a platform for young people. And it's one of the most popular performance-based activities for young people. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. That is the former immediate past Director General who was officiating at one of the Milumbe programs. The former Director General, Mr. Flexon Mizinga, said that these approaches are also used to respond to contemporary governance and economic. Our museum about contemporary issues, social trends, current affairs, world events, culture, governance, and economies. And this justifies or validates the value of museum education activities. Next slide, please. So this is a quotation from the United Nations, which there was a paper called Children in African Museums. The purpose of Milumbe is to respond to this call. The UN was saying that in many things that they do, children are expected to appreciate and contribute to the preservation and promotion of their heritage. This view is also in line with the UN Nairobi Declaration on the workshop entitled Children in African Museums. So that is why we have Milumbe. We bring the young children together, and I'll explain the trophy and that picture in the subsequent slides. So Milumbe is a response to this call by the United Nations Nairobi Declaration. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. What is the process? How do we make this education activity a meaningful, fun, hands-on, hearts-on, and minds-on? One, we bring the teachers together and members of the community to select a theme, just like a theme for the Museums Day is chosen. Then when we are doing a particular activity, there are certain resources or materials that may be needed. If it is art, we have to organize the paint, the brushes. If it is about a recording of a sketch, we have to provide the cameras and the audio visual recording equipment. We set a date, we send invitations to members of the public, including flyers, and the terms of reference. Also, we choose money so that there is a reward for the young people at the end of the day. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, so those are the trophies. Those are the young people in action. And I think those pictures are talking to themselves. So the trophies, the young art scroll, and the poetry and drama in the bottom picture. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. Are we together?
Can you see the screen?
So, yes. So the winners get a reward of a trophy, and you can see the young girls and the animals, the rhinoceros. We took them to the Livingstone National Park, and also we gave them trophies, and we organized a bus for the young people to enjoy fun outside the museum to the game park to see the animals, to see the Victoria Falls, so that the young people can enjoy having participated and won a reward from the museum. So that is the pictures there. Next slide, please. So what do? We identify the judges, we send the invitation, there is a guest list, we choose the guest of honor to officiate the theme. It could be a non-governmental organization or a government agency. We also invite the media for press coverage, and we engage with a partnership. We also give a platform for testimonies. For example, if it's about abuse, child abuse, gender-based violence, we call people to give testimonies in public at an event or on radio, depending on how the program has been organized. Next slide, please. I think that was the last one. Yeah, the products from our Milumbe program. There should be a news item in the media. To the churches, the religious community, to the politicians, there must be a petition. That is a product. We have video clips that we can use. We have feature articles in the newspaper and other journals. We have public events where people can meet and congregate together. There's a radio and television broadcast. And also we expect that there's increased museum visits. So this if we do these things, there's very little time for this presentation. I wish I could go deeper, but I would like to end here because I think in my previous presentation, I said a lot. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir Emmanuel. So next we have Ms. Buma for the presentation.
Yeah.
So Ms. Buma is the current ICOM Mongolia president. All right. So, ma'am, are you ready?
Yes, yes.
I'll share your screen.
Okay.
Sorry, I think.
Olha,
All right. Sorry, I'll give you a few minutes.
I am Boma, chair of the since to celebrate International Museum Day, promoting the Sustainable Development Goals. Maybe I will share.
Wait, it is good now. Can you see the screen, ma'am?
Yes, I see.
Okay.
Topic in Mongolian museums, and I will talk that ICOM last 2 years celebrate connected to unity and some examples of the Mongolian museums and what they each year promoted 4 targets of the Sustainable Development Goal, and I want to focus what goals or target was more understandable for Mongolian museums, and Mongolian museums focused on which goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. Of my presentation.
Sorry, ma'am, Buma. I think it is me or
Next slide, please. Huh?
Sure, ma'am. But
Yes,
there has been disconnections. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Disconnections to my or your computer.
I don't,
Okay.
that's why
You
I wanted
see
to
the
understand.
Mongolia.
It's okay, ma'am.
Map of Mongolia. Mongolia situated in Asia between Russia and China. Yes. Next, please. This is I just want to show not kit from ICOM. This photo of the Bogtam Palace Museum. This topic of the 2017 was very difficult topic. You see the museums and contestant histories, saying the unspeakable in the museums, and we also celebrated in
Sorry, ma'am, Buma. I think
celebrating.
Okay.
Maybe I will share my computer. Yes.
Actually, there
You see
is this connection. So I'm not sure whether it is from my side or from your side. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. But then can you see the screen?
You see that this is, yes, I see.
Okay.
This is the Bogtang Palace Museum, which is palace of the last Mongolian king, who was leader of the Mongolian very interesting. You see the posters, Buddhist monastery, part of the Mongolian king. You can see this photo in the in 2021. Yes, please, next slide, please. We all got the communication kit for 75th anniversary of ICOM, and you see the from 2020 they is affiliated since 2018. Sustainability placed it the first of the ICOM's mission. Next slide, please. You see the all goals of the nation, sustainable development goals images. Next, please. Mina, next slide, please.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, can you see
Translated all? Yes, I see. ICOM Mongolia translated all sub-themes and delivered it to all Mongolian museums and the ministry and tried to involve all Mongolian museums. And I have some examples. I want to notice that for 2020, we in the communication kit was 4 goals of the sustainable development goals. But when I got the report, or when I analyzed the what topic focused all Mongolian museums, I concentrated on the goal. You see the reduced inequalities, and mostly they can organize events and theme reduced inequalities, especially on the social. Took attention to the social inequalities. Not much on the equality and peace, justice, public. And next. In the topic theme of 2002, you see the museums for equality, diversity, and inclusion. So we took tried to involve much more diverse people in the Mongolian society, and tried to organize events to bring to museum different group of the people or different from the different community of. Please. We translated the report, brief report, and sent to the ICOM. And we are very glad that the ICOM report for 2020 was noticed what we had. You see you can read what was noticed in the ICOM report. And we have some ICOM published some photos. You will see next slide. Please, next slide. These are photos in the ICOM report. Use museum staff. In the northern Mongolia, where Lake Hupsigu, and where the tourists coming from all over the world. And museum staff, this was 2000 was all museums was closed doors for visitors, and all museums organized events. Site museums, they can go to the countryside, visit the Herders family, and they are organized to make fun for kids or school children who stayed at home. And they this school museum produced many and brought to home of the school children, and they painted and worked out on the posters. Please, next slide. No, you can also next slide. Because there are many slides, will take time. You can next slide, please. Also in the ICOM Facebook, they posted photo from the Payungulgi province. This Eastern Mongolia, where lives ethnic group of Kazakh, who is Muslim people. These are same people as Kazakhstan. And this museum organized competition among kids. We want equality, and they greeting their posters. National Museum of Mongolia, which is situated in the challenge to promote museum facilities in series for disabled audience, because still not every museum has standard for service disabled people. It was time to take attention to this problem. Please, next slide. Yes. This is the also old temple, brother of the Mongolian last king. This also touristic for foreign tourists to come Mongolia. This monastery situated also in the center of the capital city. This is the staff of the Church and Lama Museum. activities for International Museum Day. They are welcome visitors, and including the disabled people. They will try to take attention of the many, as much more many visitors to museum. You can read there. And also they use it as sign language for disabled people. This is also, you see the Mongolian Military Museum visited the special dormitory for children. And these kids or teenagers who are situated in the dormitory, they made greeted the posters. Next, please. You would quarantine kids from school, they made posters at home. Because this year was very difficult for school children. They stayed at home almost 2 months, not going to the school. It was very interesting for them to work on this, to color these posters. Please, next slide. This is in the costume of the ethnic groups of Mongolia. Also, they visited some families who in family only mother or father growing up their children. We have also some families, such families. Yes. Next, please. This is also, I really like it. The museum asked, what do you want to say to museum? And they expressed what they want to say to museum. And they made these posters. Yes. Next one, please. Also, this museum school promise cooperated with the teachers from the secondary school, and these teachers was guiding. If I were a museum docent, this was an interesting activity. Also, this another museum, Hanga Museum, organized writing essay about equality. Yes. This also was very interesting. Fine Art Museum named after Zanbaza. They posted in the media about diversity of the museum job, and every day one museum staff was introducing online what they are working one day what they are doing. This was also many people visited this Facebook page of this museum. This also Hinti Province Museum, where gift for newborn for May 18, 2020, province ambulance. This was also a kind action for newborn children. This is Irtenzu Museum is situated in the countryside. This is the in monastery where was our capital city, and they involved the kids also from vulnerable family to coloring 3 main temples of the monastery. What is the difference between monasteries? 2021, you see the topic theme of the International Museum Day was the future of museums, recovered and reimagined. And this was difficult goals. And they Mongolian museums most concentrated on the stretching efforts to protect and safeguard the world's cultural. This. Next, please. Next slide, please. This is the Torno diamond, which is situated in the eastern Mongolia. This is the next. This province situated next to the China. In this time was 1938 and 1945 was some war with the Japan. This time, we held online conference on topic of the 2021. Because this is very difficult to make awareness of the public about International Museum Day and topic on the sustainable development goals. And we made many video or interview posted in the social media. And some museums made also a special activity on the digital transformation, mostly. Also in Mongolia now, our Mongolian Ministry of Culture focusing on the new business models. They want to make creative, develop creative cultural models. Please. This museum made many partners on intangible heritage, because this traditional homemade things is some is forgotten, and they want to revive or introduce to people. They will learn each other. Ordinary people can be. They was promoting people who is still don't forget the, who doesn't forget this intangible heritage. And this is one of the banners what they made and posted on the social media. This is the exhibition banner from the Fine Art Museum, Zanbazar Museum. They organized exhibition from the from different God figures. You see the one of the great work of the Zanbazar. Zanbazar is the famous. Zanbazar was Mongolian also king of the and leader of the religion, 17th century of Mongolia. He was famous sculptor, and his work was exhibited in different country. Next one, please. This museum was very active, organizing different events for kids in different age. this is the one of the banners for kids, and name it "My Loved Animals." The next one, please. This is the, you see the Mongolian old writings. This Har Museum, this is the Har Museum situated in the, also in the old capital of Mongolia. They have many archaeological findings from different historical period. You see they made many copies of the with the pictures of the archaeological kids was walking and coloring these paintings. This is a small museum, Mongolian Theater Museum. They made, and where the band was playing by copy of the ancient musical instrument, which was found in the cave. This means they made copy of the archaeological object, which is musical instrument. This is I put 2 slides about our participation in the International Virtual Conference on Museums. We joined the initiative of the International Virtual Conference, which was Pakistan was organizer in collaboration with the Commit Turkey in June 14 and 17 was organized conference, the Silk Road Heritage Collection and Connections with Museums, and we, ICOM Mongolia, held session at 15th May 2021. On this conference with us was National History Museum of Kyrgyzstan, ICOM Pakistan, and the College of Art and Design, University of Punjab, Lahore, Pakistan. 4 days conference was held this time. Next, please. This is the banner of this conference. Next. This is some photos about what is doing or what is innovations in Mongolian. You see the augmented reality classes in Mongolia. Now in Mongolia, very popular using such technology, VR and AR reality and some many different technology in display. On the increasing of the visitors to museum after COVID. We had some projects in Mongolia, museum at home, in distributing culture in a virtual environment. And during the 2 years of the COVID, many museums posted in the social media photos of the objects with the short explanation, with short labels, and we see what is missing, or we see the need of the training for museum professionals to make labels, to talk story of the objects. We see there's some problems in showing in this virtual environment museum object. The next one, please. These museums also last 2 years cooperating with the government organization, ministry and UNESCO and American Center for Mongolian Studies. This is the cooperation of the National Museum of Mongolia with the Mongolia. The city government made the street named Morning Street. They're trying to bring visitors in the one of the old street of Ulaanbaatar to people, and museum early morning to bring visitors to museum. Initially, our museum staff wearing the traditional costumes of Mongolia. Yes, next one, please. This is the digital museum. You see in the 30th century Hall of National Museum of Mongolia. This technology was won award from government. Next slide, please. Also, this museum for many years organized a museum night, 2 days evening, because monastery in the evening time for them very interesting to see the monastery in the evening time. They also have mobile application. Next, please. We have in one side we had difficult time during the COVID. Same this year, you see we built the new museum, Genghis Khan Museum, in the center of the city, capital city, and also new building to the Mongolian Natural History Museum, and some provinces has new buildings also. We will have a special new museum, archaeological and ethnographical museum nearby capital city. We had beginning of the 2020, government approved the new museum law, and all children under 16 years old will visit pre-entry. And also some money reward system for collection keepers and curators who care for the collection. Because this is very important for sustainable, for building the sustainable museum. When the museum staff is leaving, we have very lost some experienced staff. Next, please. This is just after COVID, with the masks. This National Museum of Mongolia. This next, please. ICOM Mongolia prepared the report for the International Museum Day to disseminate the information for about International Museum Day, and we publish it in the museum journal. This this year for 2020 and 2021, and here also we published about Museum Virtual Conference with ICOM Pakistan, and ICOM will read about virtual conference. This is some remarks or notice. I have many reports from Mongolian museums on activities, but some of them organizing what they already planned or what they want, or they using of them very difficult, also difficult to make new events, special events, and the sustainable development goal. We need to more promote this, what this means, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is I wrote from the communication kit for this year. There are three main themes. You see that the power of the achieving sustainability, and power of the innovating on digital. Next one, please. This is what we will organize this year. Next slide, please. This is the third one, the power of community building through education. Yes. This is from the picture how it looks like the sustainable society in every country. We will hope 2030 we can all reach sustainable development goals, as in says, no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Please visit the ICOM Mongolia Facebook page.
All right. So I would like to invite Sir Terry. How do you like the presentation?
Thank you.
Okay, so our next presenter is Sir Roshan Mishra. Roshan sir, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Right. So yes, please, whenever you want to start.
Okay, I'm just going to do the presentation myself. Okay.
Sure, sir. So Roshan Mishra here. He is the founding member of Nepal Heritage Recovery Campaign, NHRC, and he will be presenting on reclaiming heritage.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. I just want to go through the Nepal Heritage Recovery Campaign. Basically, just want to give you a brief introduction as well, just to kind of relate what I've been doing. This Nepal Heritage Recovery Campaign was started in 2021. But my full-time role is at Taragaon Museum, where I'm the director and I look after the architecture collection. It's very much heritage focused, and that probably led me to kind of work in this Nepal Heritage Recovery Campaign. I just wanted to share this photograph first, because this was taken on the first day when the Nepal Heritage Recovery Campaign was launched. And you know, when Nepal was open to the West after 1960s, Nepali heritage and culture and Nepali cultural properties were exposed to the West. When, when in 60s Nepal was open, that time probably 11 or 12 Christie's branches were operating around the world. And most of these people who came to Nepal, they basically came for different reasons. Some came as a hippies, some came as anthropologists, some came as historians, They came for various different purposes. But most of these people were exposed to our heritage and culture. And that's when our heritage started missing from the original sites. So one of our main, aim is to bring back the Nepali heritage and restitute them at its original location. And this was one of the main idea of the campaign. But having said that, it was not only about repatriation, but it was also about dealing with the issues that we have within Nepal itself. So there are lots of artifacts that's being stolen almost every month that's coming in the news. So we basically work very closely with the Department of Archaeology. One of the, there are many important points why these reclaims needs to happen. As I mentioned before, after 60s, when Nepal was open to the rest of the world, since then, we have probably lost about 70 to 80% of our cultural properties. And that mostly went out of this country illegally. And if you look out for any Nepali artifacts in the West or any other museums around the world, most of them are either looted or have gone out illegally from this country. Why we need to claim? Because we are the rightful owner of these cultural properties, and someone, somehow we had to kind of act to bring this back. And why we want to bring it back is because there's not enough government initiation happening in repatriation. And that's why we formed the Nepal Heritage Recovery Campaign as a non-profit organization. And we have been a body who have been constantly supporting the government officials to communicate with the respective, museums and auction houses around the world. One of the other important part is all these objects that we want to claim back, they're actually connected with our living culture, tangible and intangible heritage. And legally, all these heritage objects that are displayed around the world were being traded in auction houses or are being sold, we can legally claim if we have even enough evidences. The whole campaign actually started with this image. You can see that particular image of Lakshmi Narayan, which was on display at the Dallas Museum. That actually got our attention when we actually initiated to open the Nepal Heritage Recovery Campaign. And this image was actually shared in the social media and was spotted by one American artist who worked with the Nepali heritage and cultural materials, and she did research as well. And then in 2021, we actually we located this object in Dallas Museum. And in April 2021, it actually got back to Nepal. So within 3-4 months time, this object was located and was brought back to Nepal. And we had lots of challenges to do so, but this was one of the first effort that we made from our campaign. And this was this picture, these two pictures. I'm on the left, I'm on the right-hand side. This was taken on the official ceremony when we actually reinstated the Lakshmi Narayan's statue at its original monument. So it was a huge, huge celebration. Lots of people attended this event, and it was a great initiation from the community. The community involvement was there. Lots of people who worked in heritage and culture, they actually came to this event as well. Similarly, these 5 objects we spotted in an auction house, Bonhams, in France, and these objects were actually unsold, and we are able to. These objects were actually on sale, and we are able to kind of stop this auction within 24 hours. And if you look at this image, the one on the left that's how it looked in the 70s. And after it was stolen, one on the right, you can see that it has completely been wrenched out from the original surface. And all these 5 different objects were actually being sold at that time. And on that particular auction, like we communicated with the UNESCO, we communicated with Interpol and FBI, and it was a great success that we actually stopped this auction within 24 hours. But having said that, we have not got these objects back to Nepal, but hopefully in future we will be able to get this back. Similarly, these 4 objects, they have been identified after the Nepal Heritage Recovery Campaign was established. The first one that came from the Metropolitan Museum, the second one in Chicago, third one from the New South Wales Gallery in Australia, and the 4th one from the Metropolitan Museum in the US as well. So all these objects were actually identified where it was stolen from and where it is at the moment. And we have communicated with the Department of Archaeology. They have actually communicated with the respective countries' Nepali embassy, and the Nepali embassy has actually communicated with the respective institutions. So all these 4 objects, you know, these institutions are looking to send it back. We haven't got it yet, but I think this will come very soon. This is another object that we identified in the social media. This was actually uploaded in a Twitter by a Nepali citizen who lives and works in the US. And this was a necklace which was stolen in the 70s from one of the very important temple in the Kathmandu Darbar Square. And again, this was spotted at the Chicago Art Museum, and we are in a process of getting this back as well. Having said that, Chicago has not actually responded very well, but we have been chasing them through our different sources and institutions. So hopefully this will also be back to us very soon. Another success story is actually 2 of these objects, which is at the back. One is from a very important monument, Itum Bahal, and the other one is from the Yampi Mahabihar in Patan. Both of these objects were identified at the Rubin Museum in New York. And once this was identified, basically these 2 objects were actually announced on the launch day of the Nepal Heritage Recovery Campaign. We found all the facts and, you know, evidences when it was stolen, where it was stolen from, the before and after images and all that. And we actually, and this was publicized very well as well. So before the government's letter actually reached out to the Rubin Museum, Rubin actually decided to return it back to the Nepali government. So this April, on February, we got these objects back, and this is actually being displayed at the National Museum in Chhaoni. What we have done so far from the campaign, basically the campaign is registered as a non-profit organization. That meant that we are not a part of the government, but we work very closely with the Department of Archaeology. So the way we work is we collect all the facts and evidences, and we hand it over to the government officials. So far, we have repatriated 7 objects. All these objects are back in Nepal. This is within a one-year frame. 13 other objects are actually identified with all the evidences and are in the process of coming back. And overall, we have identified over 40 objects during this one year period. How are we working? This is one of the questions everybody is asking us at the moment. There is one social media handle on Facebook page, which is very anonymous to most of us. And this, we work very closely with this Facebook handle. And this particular handle supports us to identify most of the matching we have done so far. So that Facebook page is a huge resource for us. We basically locate the original location in Nepal. We establish when it was stolen. We collect all the evidences such as before and after images, references, and any kind of publications that has been done in the past. We communicate with the Department of Archaeology, and we communicate and discuss with our advisory council as well. Our advisory council has got brilliant people, people like Vijay Kumar from the India Pride Project, and criminologists, art criminologists like Erin Thompson, who have been playing a huge role in this whole campaign. This is just a kind of a wireframe how we actually work and communicate in Nepal. So basically, our first contact point is Department of Archaeology, then it goes to Foreign Affairs, then to the respective country's embassy, and the museum, institution, and auction houses will be contacted from their point. And in between, if there is any need, we also contact the UNESCO office, FBI, and Interpol also. There's always a big question: what happens when it comes back to Nepal? Like lots of people, they don't want these artifacts to be back in Nepal and then sent back to storage. That is not what we are aiming. So basically what we aim is we want to bring it back, and if possible, we want to talk with the community and reinstate these objects at its original location. That is our first priority. If that is not possible to do so, then we have been working with the National Museum, Patan Museum, and other museums, if they can open up a section where they can actually display all these repatriated objects. Having said that, Chhaoni Museum, the National Museum, has recently opened up a gallery where they're actually displaying 44 objects that has been repatriated since many years. So that is one of our main target. We don't know whether they can go back to the original place or not. This is something we have to work with the government officials. We have to work with the community, and if the community needs it back, definitely we have to do that. So this is something we'll always discuss with the Department of Archaeology and other respective bodies. We don't want these objects to go back to the storage because that is not what we are aiming for. Nepali objects, Nepali gods and goddesses, they are not supposed to be stored in storage, museum storage. They're actually a living culture. They're not even supposed to be at the museum at the first place, right? So the idea is to bring them back to the public space. And that is the original purpose of all these gods and goddesses. So that is our main aim. If not, then for a certain amount of time, yes, of course, it may need to go in a storage at certain time. We don't know that, but we'll deal with with it as per every cases. Conservation and preservation is an issue when we retrieve these objects from different museums. All these Western museums, they have got climate controls. They have been, conserved very well. They have got a, conservation lab, whereas we are not equipped that way. So we really need to kind of look at that, look at this repatriation campaign from that perspective as well. It's possible for us to repatriate stone objects or the wooden objects. What if we want to repatriate manuscripts or paintings that are done on cloths or papers? It is a very difficult situation. Basically, if we have to claim any such materials, then we have to be equipped with it. Therefore, in many cases, we are not basically aiming to retrieve what we cannot preserve. You know, if they are in any institutions, museums, or universities, they are actually going to be looked after very well. We'll only try to repatriate those objects when we are ready to preserve and conserve them. So this is a part of our idea how we should really work with the whole repatriation campaign. It is always difficult to kind of deal with private collection and auction houses. The three images on the left, these are the objects that was seized from the Subhash Kapoor collection in Manhattan, and it was handed over to the Nepali consulate, and it came to Nepal. And such collections, it's very difficult to reach out because it belongs to someone and it can be sold anytime, and we would not know about it. So it is very difficult to kind of deal with such collections. The image on the right, which is a collection kept in New York by a collector, Naveen Kumar. And this is also, we know where it came from. This is we know where it actually originates. But it is very difficult for us to claim us back because it belongs to a private collector. And we are not sure if it comes back, whether we will be able to look after it or not, because this is a very fragile object. But having said that, for this particular collection, we are trying to speak with FBI and Interpol, and we are trying to raid this object from the owner. So this is something we have been constantly doing through our campaign. There are so many challenges. There are some of the challenges I've listed here. Lack of research and researches. We don't find enough evidences because of not having any sort of inventory or a database of our cultural heritage. So every time we try to make a claim, we have to kind of work really hard to look for reference images, and most of these reference images are coming from international archives and publication made by foreign researchers and scholars. It's always very difficult to deal with private collector and auction houses, as I've just mentioned before. Claims on sensitive objects, like, as I mentioned before, like objects made on paper or fabric, it is always difficult for us to kind of decide how we would be able to preserve it when it comes back to Nepal. So this is also a challenge. If we find any evidences, how do we deal in such situations? Safeguarding of the remaining cultural properties that are in Nepal, because every month we see theft happening from our monument sites, and cultural properties are being missing even from secure spaces. So that is a very challenging task for us to deal with. And sadly, there are still traders active in Nepal. There are traders who traded in 70s, and they still somehow operate in Nepal, being offshore. Still, that is happening. So these are some of the challenges we face on a day-to-day basis. This is what we do. When we face such challenges, our gods and goddesses, they are not meant to be caged or stay behind the bars. But this is how we are protecting our cultural properties. When the ancestors handed over our cultural properties to this generation, we are supposed to take care of them, but this is how we are taking care of it. There we have got no other option how we can protect these objects. If they are not locked, they may disappear overnight. So this is a very challenging task at the moment, and lots of monument sites, heritage sites, small courtyards, you see lots of these sort of structures created to kind of protect the gods and goddesses from being stolen. Repatriated deities, what is happening? Like I mentioned that in a previous slide as well. This is one of the screenshot taken from the temporary exhibition that is actually happening in at the National museum in Kathmandu. And the image on the right, which is the Torana, which was repatriated from the Rubin Museum. So that has also been gone on a display. So basically, you know, if they cannot go back to its original place, we should allow the people to come and see these objects. You know, this carries lots of stories, lots of, you know, faith, and lots of rituals and, you know, stories are attached with these objects. But having said, there's two of these objects that has been received from the Rubin museums. We're talking with the local authorities and local communities, and these two objects, we feel that this can go back to its original location. So we're looking for an option how we can actually take it back to its original place. So what does the law say? You know, there are lots of laws that we keep on seeing. There are international conventions, there are conventions that has been created by different organizations, and there are conventions and laws that has created by the Nepalese government. All these laws are there to protect our cultural heritage, our cultural properties. But are they really working? I don't know. You know, I think it is a very difficult question. Sir Terry was mentioning, you know, this is almost like a retroactive situation in a way, where all these organizations are there. You know, it's written black and white. You know, if all these sort of cultural properties are traded, and if the facts and evidences are there, they should return it back. But are they really coming back? No, I don't think so. So we really need to keep on continuing to fight with you know, auction houses, institutions, and private collectors. You know, I think in terms of museums and universities and other institutions and such institutions, I truly believe that in the next 10 or 15 years, all these institutions will voluntarily return the stolen objects back to its original country, because they cannot afford to keep this anymore. You know, if they want to be ethical, you know, there is no way they can keep it, and there is no way they can keep them in a storage, because the storage cost a lot. For example, British Museum, they have got over 8 million objects. Can they really afford to store objects which they can never display it? I don't think so. So for that reason as well, I think many of the institutions will look into that option to send these cultural properties back. We're even offering some of the museums and institutions, you know, if they return our objects back, we will get the best artisans from Nepal, and we'll assign them to create the same deity, you know, and that is something they can take it away, and they can still narrate our story in a very proud way. You know, I don't think, you know, going to the museum and then you think that all these museum objects are stolen and they're still proudly curating these objects. I think it's a very difficult situation. So I think all these institutions, they should really look into, you know, hiring local artisans to create a replica, like replica, and they should really take it back to re-narrate our stories and our culture. This is the image. The image on the left is the image that we got from the Dallas Museum, which was repatriated back to Nepal and which was actually placed at its original location. And look at how it looks. I don't think it is actually fulfilling its purpose. And look at the image on the right. You know, that was the same statue that came back from Dallas, and it was put back at its original location. And look at it, how it looks. And that was the purpose when all these gods and goddesses were created by our ancestors, you know. And that's why I keep on saying that we have to let our gods live and die with dignity. What I mean by that is, you know, when the rituals take place, when people worship these statues, they have to touch it. They have to put, you know, colors on the forehead. They have to put flowers. They have to put fruits. And over the period of time, these gods and goddesses will lose its contour. You know, that means at some point over the period of time, these gods and goddesses will convert back into a stone. They don't look the same. And that's what I meant, letting these gods and goddesses dying with dignity. And I think that is what we really need to aim, whether it's in Nepal, whether it's in India, or whether it's in Africa, we need to let our cultural property die with dignity. And that's where I end my presentation. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosenso, for this beautiful presentation. Well, I would like to invite Sir Terry, if you would like to share anything about today's presentation. Sir Terry? If not, Sir Emmanuel, are you there?
Hello.
Oh, yes, please.
Yes. Thank you very much, Roshan, for that very interesting and passionate presentation that you have made. And indeed, the issues you raise are very important, especially when it comes to regarding collections and collections that are out there. I'm very much happy that you did talk about also the touched on issues of UNESCO conventions. Yeah, so like I said in my presentation when I was talking about Africa, that much as we do have challenges in the African continent, I know that these challenges regarding cultural heritage property are the same everywhere in most parts of the world, and I think learning from what other regions are experiencing and what they have is very good. And I do thank the organizers of this particular conference for creating such platforms for sharing and people learning from other regions and what they are experiencing. It is indeed very important for us to learn from each other, learning how others are circumventing the challenges that they experience. So it was quite an enlightening presentation, and I'm very happy that I listened to you, Roshan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry, for your nice thoughts. Well, our next presenter of the day is Mr. Mostaba Ibadifat. So he is the Manager of International Affairs for the National Museum of the Islamic Revolution and Defense. And he will be presenting on the title Creative Marketing for Future Museums. And well, I will be this person to share the presentation for him. Sir Mostaba, are you ready?
You hear me?
Yes.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Greetings from Iran. The title of my presentation is Creative Marketing for Future Museums, and I want to talk briefly about this subject. Next slide, please. I'll start my presentation with this quotation from Philip Kotler, one of the most important theories of marketing, that says, marketing is not the art of finding clever ways to dispose of what you make. It is the art of creating genuine customer value. Next slide, please.
Sorry, there is some. Okay, please continue.
Yes. As you know, the functions of the museums have changed a lot. Today, they are more future-oriented spaces rather than their tendencies to the past. The role of museums has expanded from uncovering our past to providing a space for a variety of learning, engagement, and entertainment experiences. Next slide, please. In the competitive environment of today's tourism, the entertaining role of museums has become much more important than the past. Museums increasingly recognize the need to address advances in digital culture which impact the expectations and needs of their audiences. Museum collections of real objects need to be presented both on their real premises and digitally online, especially as digital and social media becomes more and more influential in people's everyday lives. The COVID-19 pandemic has also accelerated many of these changes, driving museum transformations. Next, please. In such competitive market, classic marketing strategies and tactics are not applicable anymore. What's important is surprising the audiences and the target market. Flash mob, that is a guerrilla marketing tactic, is one of the best strategies that can be adopted by museums. The performances of Rijksmuseum in Netherlands is a good example of this kind of marketing. Next, please. Museums also need to realign their missions in ways that increase social engagement, teaching, and reach out to more diverse audience, while not being so dependent on tourism, especially since COVID-19 has greatly reduced travels. Next, please. Here, I want to remind a very useful guideline that was published by ICOM in 2019. Although this guideline addresses the international committees of ICOM, but it also can be practiced by all museums. It covers different issues related to the social media, such as their typology, how to create campaigns, creating content, and so on. Next, please. Now, I would like to mention two creative and successful examples of marketing campaigns on the social media during recent years. As you know, taking selfies and sharing them is very popular among the users of social media, and museums use this opportunity to promote themselves. Museum selfie day trend has gone worldwide and spawned plenty of creative posts and social media ever since. Now, many more museums are relaxing their rules on photography in an effort to encourage more engagement with the public. Museum Selfie Day on January 18 is a perfect opportunity for people to get creative. Next, please. Another creative and successful campaign is recreation of artworks at home that was presented by Getty Museum and soon became so popular around the world. It challenged social media followers to recreate works of art with objects and even with people at their homes. During the pandemic lockdown and closure of museums, it was one of the most popular challenges on the social media. Next slide, please. At the end of my presentation, I would like to emphasize on the importance of content marketing for museums. There are numerous types of content that museums can create, including blogs, videos, infographics, ebooks, podcasts, and more. It's important to keep in mind that you should create content that is based on your museum's target keywords and your target markets. Next, please. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope to meet you in Iran soon.
Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. Well, Sir Terry, would you like to say something about this presentation?
Sorry, I'd walked out. I've just come back now.
Oh, it's
I
okay.
just found him concluding. I can't say so much. Very sorry. I was attending to something.
All right, no worries, sir. We were talking about the the creative ways of how to say this. Yeah, focusing on the museums and all. Well, thank you very much, Mustafa, for the presentation. Next, we have Miss Victoria for the presentation. Miss Victoria, are you there? Hello, Miss Victoria.
I know if she hasn't yet joined, she's joining now. I just gave her the link. She's here. She's already here. I'm sure she's connecting.
All right, sure. So till then, Sir Emmanuel, how are you feeling about today's session? Well, there is issues with internet everywhere nowadays. Well, if anybody has any
whilst Mina,
yes, sir. Yes.
I still want to say maybe one thing about. I'm sorry, I'm outside. If you hear so much noise in the background, when you're talking about marketing of museums, I want to say a statement that this is one of the changes that have happened now for museums in the 21st century, that we have moved from places which were just called as storehouses, but to places where we want people to engage with communities. And when we want to engage with communities, then museums want to become relevant to these communities. But sometimes it's not so easy for communities to know that we are there and we're offering these services to them, and then it calls for ourselves to do strategies of how to reach out to the people that we have to serve. And then it calls certainly for ourselves to market ourselves out there as institutions that offer these services that are important for the communities. And it's a thing that people are now thinking about. And even under ICOM, we do have a committee that is dedicated to museum marketing and public relations called ICOM MPR. And I would really urge the members to take time to visit this particular group on sites and see what they do and what they're planning to do, and see the programs that they've been doing, and see how maybe you can learn one or two things which you can implement in your museum, in your states. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Sir Terry. Well, we have Calypso who raised the hand. If you have any question or if you have any thoughts, please share with us.
Good day, colleagues. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you everyone for the insightful presentation. My observation is that I realize that all of us, are globally or universally have or share the same concerns about especially in relation to objects that were taken to other museums. So I'm really enjoying hearing what's happening in Asia and others, and that if we network together like this, to me, it means that we are all speaking the same language, and we can help each other to find solutions when we hear what others are doing or how they have solved problems of, returning artifacts from abroad. I'm really excited to hear this from other colleagues. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you very much, Ms. Calypso. for your thoughts.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes. Would you like to, are you ready first?
I don't even know if I'm ready. But then you have my presentation, and maybe
Yes.
I can just talk through it.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, then I will share the screen.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Good afternoon, and sorry for joining late. My presentation talks about decolonization of cultural objects in the process of restitution and repatriation. And in this case, I want to talk about the Zambian objects that are in the Swedish museums and the project that is being run by the Women's History Museum in Zambia. You can go to the next slide. Here, the Women's History Museum in Zambia is working in conjunction with the Museum of Ethnography in Stockholm in a project called Empowering Women's Histories, Sharing Digital Heritage between Zambia and Sweden. And it has been funded by Swedish Institute-run program, Creative Force. This program, you can go to the next slide. Yes, this program has taken a different course, so to speak, in the restitution of objects that are being held by European museums, African objects held by European museums. And in this case, the objects are being restituted first of all digitally on a digital platform. But to begin with, unlike other places where the objects are returned from government to government, this project takes back the objects to the people before the objects can be taken back to into a museum or any museum, or can be claimed by any government, so to speak. So the first step is to take the objects to the community from which the objects were removed. Here you can look, we had a workshop with some objects that were collected from Gwembe Valley in the 1920s by Swedish collectors. And we took the objects back to the community, first of all, on a digital platform where they were able to recognize the objects or to identify the objects. Because the first thing that we wanted these objects to be, or how the process should be, was ownership. So ownership cannot take place if something is not identified. So we took a number of pictures of some of these objects to the Gwembe community, and they were able to identify particular objects that they believed were their own and were gotten from their communities in a period that this community, this generation of people that we met were not there, but they were able to recognize them. So in this picture, you can see where we were showing them the objects, and the community were pointing out the objects that they could recognize, naming them by their local names, and recognizing them and identifying them as their own. Next slide, please. The identification process involved different types of people from the community, and it involved both men and women, young people, people in different people of different status within the community. Why we wanted that was that we didn't just want people of power, of people and particular objects. The process, yes, you can go to the next slide. at the was so interesting. Some of the objects that were shown to this community were not only identified, but some members were able to demonstrate how the object was even made or how it came about to be like that. Here, this woman was demonstrating how a grain bin, it was a picture of a grain bin made around the 1920s, how it was made to be the way it was and the shape and everything. And she had witnessed that with her grandmother when she was growing up. So this process was not only identifying, but also some people gave much more extra information even as in how the object was made. Next slide. Also, the process was a group work because some of the objects could not be recognized immediately. They were taken out a long time from this community, and it involved group consultation where members argued among themselves, offered information, and eventually when they arrived at a concession or consensus, then we would take the information as it were. So it was a group work. It was not like individuals. And also it allowed time for the participants to have a discussion amongst themselves. Next slide, please. So through this workshop, we recognized particular things came out from the theme. If you think of decolonization, what is it? What would you be talking about when you talk of decolonization of cultural objects? And what was coming out mostly, first of all, was the respect for the object. Most of these objects that have been removed from the societies that they belong to, they are displayed in a manner that they lack the respect associated with a particular object from where it came from. And one would wonder, how do you describe respect? Respect can be described or can be acknowledged in so many ways. And I'll just mention two major ways that kept on coming during this workshop. It was one was the naming of the object. Most of these objects have been named because they've been taken away from where they belonged. They've been given general names. The generalization of naming amounted to disrespect among the owners of the objects. They felt offended that objects could not be called by their particular name, because in a name is in recognizing what an object is. It's just like the same way in human beings, people want to be called by their name. To be generalized just like a people, this is a group of people, it carries some sort of disrespect. And the owners wanted the real and actual names and particular names to be attributed or given to the object, or to allow the object to be known by the name that the owners knew it of. And then the other aspect of disrespect was the context of the object. Most of these objects that have been taken out, they are being displayed out of context from what they are or what they should be. And owners of the objects felt that when an object is displayed out of context, that amounted to disrespect or disregard of the object. Next slide, please. Generalization of objects is very respectful because it can deduct some of the values of the object. So when you generalize the naming of an object, it is disrespectful in the sense that it deducts some of the values that the object may have. Next slide, please. I'll give one example. this society of the Mpande shell, in
Miss Victoria, I think we lost you. There seemed to be internet issue, I think. Hello, Miss Victoria. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Sorry, I think we lost you for a while because of internet issue.
Okay,
Please
yes.
continue. Would you like me to change the slide?
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yes, so now this Mpande shell for us as museums professionals, when we looked at this object, we had a general name of, it's a pendant, a Mpande pendant, necklace pendant. But the owners had specific names for each part of this object. The string had a name, the beads had a name, and most interestingly, the Mpande shell itself had a particular name which is derived from its shape, and that is ndolo. So this type of pendant that had this particular shape was not just called Mpande, which is a general name, but was called ndolo. So we were able to get these specific names for this particular object. Next slide, please. Then the context, most of the objects that have been taken out have been exhibited out of context. Most of them, they would emphasize one aspect and ignore the other. So a wrong context can make an object to lose some of its value as well. Next slide. For instance, one context of an object, make a mistake in Africa ourselves, and at Choma Museum in particular, was the grinding stone. The grinding stone, we have always known it to be a kitchen utensil and nothing else. But during this workshop, the owners were able to identify the grinding stone and the context in which it existed. And to them, it was not only in the kitchen, but it was also an item that was used for funeral rites. And we learned that the grinding stone was placed at the head of the burial mound of an elderly woman in her life, and to thank her for the service that she had given to the community. And in this sense, that is, the kitchen activities. So the grinding stone was one of the objects in the Wembe Tonga culture that is never inherited, but would be put on a tomb to respect the person that lies there, and normally this is a woman. And when we went back to our museum, we were also able to include in the funeral rites exhibition the grinding stone, because this was now added value of what this object was to the owners. Next slide. So here I'm just demonstrating that immediately after this workshop, when we went back to the museum, we had to include the grinding stone as part of the funeral rites into this display of Tonga funeral rites. Next slide. Another aspect was acknowledgement of the makers and the owners of the objects. In most cases, the status of ownership including the owners and the makers, is normally excluded. The action has made some owners and makers to negatively view objects from which they are excluded. This scenario can negatively affect the care of collections when repatriated. So we would want in this repatriation that these objects are not only identified, for instance, as Zambian or Ugandan or Zimbabwean. We want the objects to be recognized by the community from which they were gotten from, or who made them, who created them. In this case, we wanted the Gwembe Valley Tongas to be recognized as owners of these objects when they are repatriated to Zambia, because ownership and recognition of ownership is part of the care and the respect and decolonizing of the objects. Next slide. And knowledge of the objects also gives the right value of the object. So value can be assumed in so many senses. And sometimes when we remove some of these things, we limit the value for which the object has. And knowledge is part of the value that normally is lost in some of these objects. Next slide. The two most ignored knowledge of objects in museums are the physical properties of the object. Museum professionals would rather emphasize the physical properties of the objects and not how these properties came about. So how an object was created or how it came about, normally we do not put much emphasis. Emphasis is put onto just how the outlook of the object is. But when we took these objects back to the owners, they were able also to demonstrate how the object was made. To them, that was an important inclusion that they didn't want to exclude from an object. Then also the technology and skills to bring about the object. Most times the technology is not appreciated and the skills are not appreciated on how that object came about. What is only appreciated is only the way the object looks. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. In here, I'm just showing a picture of how some of the objects that are out there, and these ones are baskets, Tonga baskets that are part of the Swedish collection, how they were made and how the intergenerational knowledge transfer happens in the basketry industry among the Tonga. And this one, we got the picture while it's doing the workshop. And this is an aspect that is ignored and is not acknowledged because museums emphasize the outlook of the object and not the skills that went into it. And even the skill holders, the ones that know that particular skill. Next slide. Then another aspect was the story of the object. Some objects have a story embedded in them. Meanwhile, museums have the tendency of wanting to tell the story of the object in their own view or in their own worldview. And in this object, in this workshop, we found out that some objects have got stories to tell on their own, and it should be, the object should be allowed to tell its own story. And this can only be achieved by the owners or makers of the objects that can explain the stories embedded in the object. Next slide, please. I'll give one example, the story of the objects in the basket display Choma Museum, these baskets, which we are interpreting as only containers, and which some of which are also that is were taken long time ago. If given to us, we'll just interpret them as containers, just the way we interpret them today in our museum displays. But talking to the owners or the makers, they had stories that this basket carried. They were not looked upon as only containers, but as carriers of messages. Next slide, please. Next slide, yeah. So we would want, when I talk about different stories or the stories of the baskets themselves and different worldview, the owners to tell the stories embedded in the objects. The good example, of course, is the Chonga baskets. And this picture was documented by a Swedish collector showing a Chonga woman making a basket. This picture just says making a basket, but for the Chongas, this the process of making this same basket is a process of documenting local history from time immemorial. The decorations which are embedded in the basket carry their histories, carry their beliefs, and to them, when they look at a particular basket, they just don't look at it as a basket, but they look at it as a history carrier. It carries stories, it carries their beliefs. And when they look at a person like this one making a basket, he's not only a maker of a basket, but this is a storyteller. This is also a documentalist. Next photograph. Next slide, please. Yeah. The previous photograph which we looked at was taken in 1920. When we did the workshop, we took no, you can go back to the yes, this one. Yes. So we took a photograph of a woman in 2020 still making the same kind of baskets as this one taken in 1920. So if you look at the two baskets, the two makers, they are doing exactly the same thing they've been doing for centuries. But what we learned from them is that they're not just making baskets. Here they were documenting their history through their basket patterns. Next slide, please. So the Women's History Museum has chosen to do the repatriation differently. They would like to study the objects first before bringing them back and building them up for usage to researchers. They want to incorporate the environment into the exhibition, the environment within which these objects were taken into the exhibitions that they will be exhibited when they are repatriated. Next slide, please. And they would like to have a process where we are not talking from one country to another, but to have some objects taken back to their communities in which they belonged and to be left in the communities in which they belonged. They would want the objects to be accessed through the guardianship of the owners, and then the communities to be recognized as the experts in the knowledge of the objects, and the communities to be consulted as owners and objects. So they want to approach it from the community to the museum and not vice versa, where the museum is dominating and the community looks like they are not part of this process, but they would want the community to be the center and the ownership to be attributed to them as well as the knowledge. Next slide, please. They also want to make sure that these repatriated objects should have relevance to the community today. What are we going to do with them if they come back? So that's something that museum community have to start thinking about. Otherwise, they will just be locked up in storerooms and forgotten. So they want the artistic aspirations from the objects, drawing lessons from the objects, if it's moral lessons, scientific lessons, and also recreation and aesthetic use of the objects. So these objects should not be dormant, but should have the relevance in today's community. Next slide, please. So they have created a program called Fabricated Stories, where they have involved artists from different parts of the country in Zambia to look at these objects and create artistic works, use out of them, and have another usage that people can look at, or creatively, or making something out of this. So like this sleeping mat, it was gotten from the people of northern Zambia, and an artist in Zambia looked at this and has been able to make music, to create music using the stories of what this mat represents in the visa country, I mean in the visa context, so that artistically, as a musician, lessons are drawn, stories are drawn from this mat, and they are produced as music. So this object is not just a mat, but it has now gained another meaning in the music industry. Next slide. The drum is also part of the same collection we are talking about, and an artist has created the sounds of this drum into the music that she's going to produce. Next slide. Other artists have looked at a comb like this one, which is among the collections that is in Sweden, and they are making artwork using the inspirations of this particular artwork of, this was a comb, a wooden comb collected in around the early 1900s, and a visual artist is making art inspired by the artist that is shown in this, or that was used in this comb of the 1900s. Next object, next slide, yeah. And there's this, it's a skin of an animal that was used as cloth among people of the Bangoulu swamps, and they had intricate decorations made onto the onto the skin, and then they would wear it as cloth. And a designer who designs clothes, a Zambian designer who designs clothes, was given this to look at, and she's making something out of fabric, but inspired by the decorations of this same skin that was used as clothes in the 1900s, and it's part of the collections that we want to be repatriated. Next slide. So to conclude, I would say that meaningful restitution of cultural objects cannot take place from the point of view of museums experts only. The true value of the cultural objects can only be determined when there's a change in curatorship of objects to include the owners of the objects. And in this sense, we are talking about the communities from which these objects were taken. The community's point of view should take center stage to interpret what these objects are. And then by the end of the day, we would want these objects, when they come back, to be relevant to today's lives. We don't want them to be in storerooms, stored away, hidden from the public, but to be objects of inspiration from where we can, our lives can take meaning from them. This is my presentation. I've come to the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Victoria, for this beautiful presentation. Let me invite Sir Terry, if he has any thoughts about your presentation. Sir Terry, are you there?
Yes, I'm actually here. First of all, I will say congratulations and thank you very much to our colleague, Madam Victoria Pirich Tungo, for that very, very inspiring presentation that has been made. I would like to also just state for our colleagues that Sister Tungo actually happens to be one of our most precious ethnographers that we have in the country. And I think we really appreciate having her within the museums. And she has done great works in the ethnography area and has written so many articles and also chapters in books regarding ethnography. It is very interesting that I listened to the presentation of my colleague, Madam Victoria. You will reckon that many aspects of what she has made in her presentation, I did mention them already when I made my presentation regarding decolonization and the importance of putting the communities at the center, the changing of our mindsets as curators, as we work in museums. It can no longer be that the curators that are in the museum are the almighty custodians of all knowledge and wisdom of people's cultures, but we need to engage the people. And that is what we were saying, that we need to start challenging the frontiers of our comfort zones as curators and think a little bit outside the box and do some inclusion of other people. And there, the aspect of restitution and repatriation brings another aspect that Madam Victoria has just raised now. And when we talk about repatriation and restitution, we open other spaces, and you can see from what she has presented, there's some triangulation that has been made between curators in Zambia, the local communities, and the colleagues that are in the global north that are keeping the collections. Not only new knowledge has been brought up for people to learn more, and as curators at her museum has led to changing things in the exhibition, but also there is a networking that is created for future works to be done. And that is one of the opportunities that this kind of research does. A lot of provenance research is being done by many other institutions, but this one that the Women's Museum is doing is unique in its own way. And I think it is a lesson for many others to learn from as one of the avenues that can be used on this road to restitution and repatriation of our cultural heritage property. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir Terry. Well, I would like to invite Sir Emmanuel. Well, I'm really sorry that I didn't respond to you when you raised your hand previously, but then, yeah, like we are ready for you. If you would like to share any thoughts about today's presentations.
I just want to say it was great being part of the meeting, and to Victoria, it was good to be part of her team in the Gwembe project. Yes, I also appreciate the efforts in the earlier presentations on museum marketing. I think we need to invest a lot in marketing, telling people what we do. people don't know much about museums, particularly our outside exhibition activities. So there is need for us to invest in that particular area. And also the presentation by Buma, I think, was very informative and very rich in content. Yeah, and the process of decolonization is a conversation which we're going to have for a long time. I think Victoria, Terry, and is it Roshad?
Roshan.
Yeah. Yeah, gave us a very great insights. I just want to pay particular attention and note the importance of people who are custodians of these smuggled items and objects. Is there a way in which they can be voluntarily returned to their original owners without investigation processes, without Interpol, and all these international protocols that have been put in place? I think I raised it in the chat session that it is a moral question. It's a moral question now, particularly when Roshan was talking about the religious objects and deities. These are objects which have got a certain degree of sanctity, and to rob people of religious items, I think it's very unfair. Now, this is my submission. And Victoria, it was great being part of your team. For a moment, I thought she was not going to come. I'm happy that she came.
Right.
Thank you, Mina.
All right. Thank you very much, Sir Emmanuel. All right. Thank you very much for all the beautiful presentation and beautiful thoughts. But we actually have one more presenter. She was Maggie Katongo. But then I think, we have certain issues with this time zone. So she was not able to be here with us and present her, presentation. But maybe we can find some other, programs or other platform to bring her and then, make her share her presentation with us. But thank you very much for this. Well, I would like to take questions if anybody has, any question for our presenters. Let me go through the chat. I don't think we have any questions in the chat box, but if anybody has a question, please raise your hand and you can ask questions. Well, I don't see any questions here. All right. So, Javed sir, would you like to say something? Yes. Yes, sir, Terry.
Okay, I just had one question maybe to add for Madam Victoria, just for the benefit of all of us. Madam Victoria, could you just state how long this project you're doing with Women's Museum, what time frame was planned up to the aspects of restitution of objects if it has to happen?
Madam Victoria, are you there? Sorry, Sir Terry. I think we need to hold the question for her. Maybe we can ask her and then let her reply.
Okay. Maybe she has left. I'm not sure. Is she still there?
Yeah. Well, it shows that she is here, but maybe because
well,
she's outside.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sir Terry.
Okay.
Well, Sir Emmanuel, you raised your hand. Do you have any question?
It's just that the link, as you noticed, from time to time, there were gaps. I know that Mina, you're going to share the link afterwards,
Sure.
but also some of the presenters had their, what can I say? They had their notes, their talking points, besides the slides. It would be good for us to get the in-depth, especially on the decolonization and restitution aspects. I think it would be good to share those because for me, it was a very good theoretical insight into what is happening to these items, like I alluded to earlier. So it would be good to share the points. I'm particularly interested in Booma's write-up and also Roshan Mishra's write-up. It would be good for us to, if it is possible, to share those so that those of us who are still new in the ICOM system, who are still developing our careers, can know the debate which has been ongoing for some time. I would say it's really sad that these developments, but one thing that makes me comforted and contented is that there is a lot of vigorous, powerful effort to recover most of these items. The world is undergoing a lot of tension. There have been wars in certain places where artworks, religious objects have been are in the wrong hands, and it has taken a long time. In Zambia, for instance, there is the case of the broken human. Up to now, it's just a debate. The protests have been made. So it would be good. My appeal is to have the notes, the write-ups behind the slides, so that we can have insight. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you very much, Sir Emmanuel. We will discuss this with the family forum, and if possible, we will make the presentation and notes available for our attendees and everybody. Well, yes, Sir Terry, do you have anything you would like to say?
Yes, just one small comment. We have heard already here from members saying, is it possible for
Sorry,
owners,
Sir Terry?
one of the
Could you
yes,
please repeat, because there, there was a bit of broken link for a while. Anyway, please.
okay. I was just saying that there was a question of asking, can't these states that are keeping objects or collections that were taken from our states just return them ethically? Yes, it is a question of ethics, certainly, but there is another thing that states or museums that have their objects that are domiciled abroad can do, is that of creating some constituency of communities to raise the concerns and the need for these objects to come back through public forums, doing write-ups, interviews, and so on. And this adds some form of soft power pressure on the institutions and the states that have these objects to start thinking about restitution and repatriation. And if you look at the most precious objects that have returned to states, for instance, if you're going to talk about the Benin Bronzes back to the Benin city in Nigeria, or those that have returned to Benin as a country, or you think of the Maori, that objects that were returned to New Zealand, you will see that prior to this return and discussions, there has been some constituency around the communities to demand for their objects to come back to their states. So this is a very important aspect that people must keep in mind that when you want to do this, create that constituency, the people must see the need to have the objects, must have already an idea of what they want to do with these particular objects before they start asking for them to come back. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Sir Terry. Yes, Sir Emmanuel, you were raising hand.
Yes, I wanted to draw the attention to the deities that my brother Roshan talked about. When these objects or specimens or artifacts come back, they must not be put in the storerooms. They must be put in their rightful places. I think that point really registered in my mind. It is where we put them afterward. It's not just, it should not be a process of restitution, but restitution for good reasons. And I think Victoria also raised that point, the value, the true value of these artifacts, the true value of these objects lies in the owners. For instance, the deities were put back in their rightful places. I don't think that was even a museum. It looked like a public place, a public space. I think when objects and restitutions are on the right space, they will be appreciated more. A deity, for instance, will be put back in its proper prayerful place. And also in the case of the baskets, you see how the baskets tell their own stories. And also the owners, those who are the true custodians, add value, and they continue transmitting the story from generation to generation about what the baskets mean. They're not just storage items, but they are more, there is more to the object. There is that story behind. I thought I should add that point on putting them in their rightful places and also giving them the actual value. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Sir Emmanuel. Actually, I do agree with you as well as Sir Terry that, both the presentation of Ma'am Victoria and Sir Roshan, they were very relatable, and there were a lot of things that could actually go, hand in hand, whatever the issues that were raised, in their presentation. Yes, Sir Javed, would you like to say something about this?
Yeah, after saying so much about this session by Terry MB and Emmanuel Suppo, there is nothing I think left I could talk about and say something else, except for say thank you very much indeed to everybody, participants and speakers, and they have been given us a very valuable sharing of knowledge. So definitely Buma is our permanent member, and she is a very nice lady, and apart from that, she is very learned lady. So she definitely, her presentation was excellent, I should say. So while Terry MB and Emmanuel say about Victoria, then I would say that give her a title, Princess of Victoria from Museums of Zambia. You see, so that should be respected. You see, people should be respected by award. In fact, you see, they do a good job, but then there should be some award for them too. So Roshan is a lightful. Roshan means lightful. So he was lightful today. You see, he has seen over many, influenced over many speakers about his stolen objects and their return, and then mounting onto right place where they belong, really. So and the slogan, which I say that make a God livable, you see, this is something like that, so I just forget. So he really made a God livable in his speech. So similarly, our Iranian friend Mujtaba has given an excellent presentation on marketing, museum marketing. But I think that he forget to include some points which have been, I would love to have again invite him on some conference so that he could add those points and give us. You see, we will be thirsty. We will be left thirsty if he was not complete that. You see. So this is, I think, and all other speakers. I'm so glad that I have been day by day we are improving the quality of selection of speakers, and to those people, those are recommending us, like Emmanuel and Terry MB and Terry MB, and then Boma and that. So they are recommending us some very good speakers, really. So Roshan was recommended by you. You see, it's Mina. So he was recommended by you. So it's a, you see, the quality matters. In fact, quality matters and expertise matters. So the command and grip on a knowledge is really matter. When you are delivering something, then you are not shaky in delivering the things. You are very strong in delivering the thing. So this is it. But I must share with you all people that the ICOM Family Forum and IVCOM has joined hand with this
SDG?
This is a new setup in Dubai. So that's Together for Heritage, you see, Together for Heritage, and this is on SDGs. So you will monitor 17 at SDGs, and they have a partner, affiliated partner, many affiliated partner from like ICOM Egyptian, ICOM. Say Tunisia, and that so on. So they will be soon arranging training programs, and they will be giving chance to ICOM Family Forum and IVCOM people, so that they can join those programs, and both ways they can talk on those programs, and they also can learn those programs. So thank you very much. I'm really, I don't want to take too much time because we are already late. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Terry. MV, it's a full support, his full support, and also that I mean, also see my brother, my friend. So whenever I ask him anything, he has been providing me that without any ifs and buts, you see. So thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much all speakers, and thank you very much Boma, Dr. Dan, and all other friends, especially our friend from Egyptian, our friend from France, and our friends from Croatia, and they have been giving us help from India also. So they have joined us. Thank you very much indeed. Not only that, I see the name Luisa Di Pina. So she is the chair of Latin America, Dominica. She is chair of Dominica, Latin America, and so on. Many other friends, they have joined it. So thank you very much. So tomorrow, what we are going to have tomorrow, that Meena should announce it.
Yes, sure, sir. Thank you very much, Javed, sir. Well, actually, Victoria, ma'am, she has raised her hand. So, ma'am, if you have anything you would like to say, please, you are welcome.
Yes, sorry, I could not be heard. My connection was bad. I hope I can be heard now.
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to answer Terry's, I wanted to answer Terry's question. I heard it. Yes, this project is a pilot project, which we tried for 2 years from 2020 to 2022. And we are concluding it with another workshop in the Bangweulu swamps. But then what the information that we have gotten, and the Swedish Institute would like to give back these objects, but then it's the process, you know, it's political, it involves countries, it involves signing of documents. So that process actually takes long. But for us, what we wanted to do was, can we have them, these objects, even on a digital platform? And this digital platform will be ready in the next few months, where people can access the objects, use them for research and for any other thing that they would like to. So in a way, they will be repatriated digitally to begin with, before the actual objects come. The feeling is that it's taking too long. If you talk of the Broken Hills man's skull, it has taken years and years, and all we've been talking about is having it back, but it never comes. And we feel that even in this process, governments take so long to do things, and there's so many rules, which some of us don't even understand, but we want to use our objects like right now. And the repatriation for us is urgent. And if we can have it even in another form, while we wait for the actual objects, we feel, why not do that? So the digital repatriation will be done in a few months' time. It was supposed to be done this April, but we have delayed maybe for 1 more month, and then we'll announce when it's open. And Terry, I'm sure you are one of the people who will be the first to know as ICOM. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for answering the question, Ma'am Victoria. And also, like, I'm very happy to, know about this digital repatriation process. You see, like, there are times when the community is not ready to accept all these, the cultural heritage which has gone away from the country. Sometimes that happens, in communities, like they don't even recognize what they lost, because, they lost it for like so long period of time that they don't have any memory left. So having this digital repatriation actually helps to, warm up the whole community and then welcome them in a more family manner. That's what I see. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your attention and also patience. Well, I would like to inform you all that we have our second session tomorrow on 6th April with ICOM CECA, Mozambique. And yes, we would love to see you all, with us tomorrow. And with this, well, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to our honorable keynote speaker, Mr. Terry, and esteemed our session leader, Mr. Emmanuel, as well as all the presenters, Ms. Victoria, Ms. Buma, Mr. Roshan, Mr. Mustafa, sorry, the pronunciation was a little bit tough anyway. And also thank you very much to all the attendees for being with us, and then, being here and also communicating your thoughts with us. Thank you very much. Well, with this, I would like to say goodbye to you all and then wrap up the whole session. Thank you very much for being with us. Wish you all a good day and good evening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.